My name is Lena. I am 34 years old. They told me there was no room left, not even a spare mattress on the floor. I had helped pay the down payment on that house when no one else could qualify for the loan. I stood quietly by the front door, holding my keys like they were someone else's. And when they said, "We do not have space for you. Get out," I walked away without a word and bought the house beneath their feet. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I was the quiet one, the one who remembered birthdays, packed extra snacks for other people's children, and showed up at hospitals without waiting to be called. In every family photo, I am the one standing just slightly to the side, smiling, but never centered. I never demanded space. I only asked to belong. My name is Lena, and I am 34 years old. I grew up in a home where attention was currency, and I was always poor. When my parents divorced, I stayed with my mother. My brother and sister moved in with our father and stepmother, whose house had air conditioning, piano lessons, and brand-name cereal. My world was smaller, quieter, but I learned how to stretch a dollar, how to patch holes in socks, and how to disappear so others could shine. I never blamed them. Not really. I understood my mother was tired, and my siblings were children too. I worked early jobs, cleaned for neighbors, and took night classes. I sent birthday cards with $5 bills I could not afford to spare. When my brother wanted to go to an out-of-state college, I co-signed his loan. When my sister had her first child at 22, I used my savings to buy her a crib and a car seat.
No one asked me to.
I just thought, maybe love looked like giving before being asked. Years later, when my stepmother passed suddenly, my father called a family meeting about the house. It had been paid off partially, but refinancing was needed. They wanted to keep it in the family. Everyone agreed it was the heart of our gatherings, the only constant left from our childhood. But no one had the credit or the savings to back the refinance. Except me. They asked if I could sign on as co-owner and contribute to the down payment. I said yes. Quietly. I thought that finally, maybe I was part of the center. I moved into the guest room to help during the transition. What was supposed to be a few months turned into years. My sister and her husband moved in too. Then my brother, after a layoff. The living room became a playroom. The basement became storage for their lives. I never complained. I kept working from my laptop in the kitchen. Paid the internet bill. Did the grocery runs. I brought home everyone's favorite brands, even if I bought off-label for myself. On my 33rd birthday, I came home to find balloons in the yard. I smiled, thinking someone had remembered. But the celebration was for my nephew. His birthday was 2 days after mine. They had combined the party. No one said my name. The cake had his name on it. The candles were shaped like dinosaurs. I stood in the corner, holding a bag of paper cups I had bought on the way home. No one noticed. When I offered to help serve, someone said, "You can just relax. You're always around anyway." Always around. Like a chair. Or a dish towel. Useful, but unnoticed. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed. The guest room, once mine, now shared with bins of old toys, and I realized something quietly painful. They did not see me. I was not a sister, not a daughter, not even a guest. I was a placeholder. That was the night I started writing things down. Old emails.
Texts about money.
The original agreement I had signed, still saved in a dusty drawer. At the bottom of it was a single paper crane I had folded while waiting at the loan office all those years ago. No one had noticed then, but I remembered. And that was the first night I slept without guilt in my chest. That year, spring came early. The cherry tree in the front yard bloomed soft pink, like it always did. Children ran past the porch barefoot. My sister hosted Sunday dinners and posted photos online of our beautiful family home. I was not in a single picture, not even the one I took. But I smiled quietly because I had started to remember something they had all forgotten. I was not always this invisible, and I was not always this quiet. Not forever. The next time they forgot my name, I did not correct them. I just wrote it clearly, on a legal form they would never see coming. The petals kept falling from the cherry tree, and I began planting something deeper than roots. By summer, the house had grown louder. But not for me. My sister's toddler screamed through nap times. My brother ran video games through midnight. And yet, when someone left the front door open, I was the one asked to check it. When the trash overflowed, they waited for me to take it out. And when the fridge was empty, I was always the one who restocked it, without a thank you, without a glance. I did not mind at first. I told myself it was temporary. I had told myself that for 3 years. When my sister's husband lost his job, they moved into the master bedroom, just until they got back on their feet. I had been living in that room, sharing it with a folding desk and my clothes in neat rows on hangers. They moved my things into the hallway, without a word. Not a discussion. Not even an apology. I came home one evening to find my underwear in a cardboard box beside the stairs. She got the room. I got the leftovers. The only space left for me was the couch, threadbare and slanted. My laptop lived in my backpack. My toothbrush in a Ziploc bag under the sink. They began referring to my corner of the living room as the waiting area. Sometimes, when friends visited, I heard them whisper, "She is still here?" As if I were a stain they could not scrub out. They would never say it directly. They used smiles and soft tones. "Oh, Lena just works from home. She does not mind. She is easy." But I did mind. I minded when the utility bill came, and my name was still the only one on the account. I minded when the car insurance I had helped cover was never reimbursed. I minded when my niece handed me her backpack without speaking, because even the children had learned that I was the helper, the filler, the invisible backbone of the house. Once, I brought home groceries, $1.47 worth, and placed them on the counter. My sister looked up from her phone and said, "Can you grab almond milk next time? The regular one makes him gassy." Not a thank you. Not even eye contact. And when I asked for help moving a dresser one day, my brother said, "Maybe you should not have bought furniture if you were not planning to stick around."
He said it laughing.
Light-hearted. But the words landed hard. Stick around. As if I was lingering. A stray leaf the wind forgot to carry away. I started waking up before everyone else. Slipping outside to drink my coffee in silence. I began journaling. 1 page for every injustice, every moment I had been erased. My handwriting grew sharper. My thoughts colder. No one noticed. They noticed only when I stopped cooking. Stopped buying snacks. Stopped picking up prescriptions for our mother. That was when my sister said, "You have been moody lately. Is something wrong?" I almost laughed. Something had been wrong for years. And it had a name.
Me.
I was wrong for being here. For staying silent. For helping too much. They could not say it outright, but they showed me in every way they knew how. In how they praised each other. How they cut me from the group text. How they took family photos with me holding the camera. They called me selfless. What they meant was silent. But I had started hearing myself again. And that voice inside me was getting louder. One day, I watched as my sister hosted a brunch. She used the plates I had bought, the tablecloth I had sewn. Her guests sipped mimosas and cooed over her cozy little home. I sat in the kitchen, out of view, scrolling through listings I could never afford. Not because I lacked income, but because my savings had been poured into this house, the one I was no longer allowed to claim. I still had the receipt. $38,000 toward the down payment. $400 monthly toward utilities. 3 years of food, maintenance, and support. But no name on the mailbox. I looked out the window and saw my brother hosing down the driveway. A friend waved and called out, "You guys got a good deal on this house." My brother smirked. "Yeah, we were lucky."
Lucky.
I closed my notebook slowly. That night, I began printing. Bank transfers. Email threads. Loan documents. I did not know what I was going to do yet. But I knew this. If they wanted me out so badly, they were going to regret how they did it. The next morning, my sister asked if I could pick up paper towels. I nodded, smiled, and added another receipt to my file. They had taken the room. They had taken the space. But they had forgotten the one thing that could not be erased. My name still etched into the foundation they stood on. The house had started to turn into a theater. Roles were assigned. lines delivered. My sister played the hostess. My brother was the handyman. My mother, the fragile matriarch. And me? I was the curtain. Always there, pulled aside, unseen. That summer, my cousin graduated from nursing school and a big family dinner was planned. My sister offered to host. She wanted everything to be perfect: Pinterest boards, catered trays, flower arrangements. She made a group chat titled Family Dinner Planning. I was not included. I found out about the party when I overheard her rehearsing a toast. Still, I helped. I wiped down the counters, folded napkins, vacuumed under the couches where children had crushed crackers. I was not bitter, just curious. How far could someone go in pretending you did not exist? The evening came. I wore a navy dress I had not pulled out in years. For once, I put on lipstick. I stood near the window, watching relatives trickle in, hugs, loud greetings, bottles of wine. Laughter spilled down the hallway like smoke from a fire I was not invited to warm myself by. The house filled quickly. My mother asked me to help bring out the trays. I balanced 3 at once. No one looked up when I entered the room. The dining table was already full. My brother gestured to a folding chair in the corner. Not at the table. Not even facing it. I sat quietly and watched as they toasted my cousin. Here's to the first nurse in the family. To strong women. To breaking barriers. Everyone clapped. I raised my glass late. No one noticed. Later, someone passed around old photo albums. When my cousin flipped to a page from a childhood reunion, she smiled. I remember this day. All of us were there. Except I was not. I had been at work. Double shift. Picking up hours so my sister could afford a dress for that same event. When I mentioned that memory gently, my cousin blinked and said, "Oh, I forgot you used to work there." Used to. As if the years I gave to them were dust. As if the parts of me that held their weight no longer counted.
Dessert came.
Chocolate mousse, fruit tarts, mini pies. All store-bought. I had made a lemon cake, my grandmother's recipe, but it remained unopened on the far end of the table. Someone said, "Whose is this?" My sister waved a hand. "Oh, I think Lena brought it. She bakes sometimes." Then they moved on. Later that night, after everyone had left, I stood in the kitchen and stared at the untouched cake. I sliced a single piece for myself and sat at the empty table. I took one bite, then another. It was perfect, but not for them. A week later, I was asked not to park in the driveway anymore. My sister's husband said it was getting too crowded with the baby gear and deliveries. I parked 2 blocks away. In the rain. No one offered an umbrella. One evening, my mother and siblings gathered in the living room, talking about the future of the house. They wanted to renovate. "Open up the walls," my brother said. "Turn the garage into a second living room," my sister added. I stepped in cautiously and asked, "What about me?" They turned toward me like I had coughed during a prayer. My brother shrugged. "You do not need much space. You are barely here." My mother said nothing, just looked down at her knitting. I backed out of the room slowly. I wanted to scream. Instead, I went to the backyard and stood under the cherry tree. The blossoms had fallen. Just bare branches now. I remember brushing my fingers against the bark and thinking, this used to be mine. The feeling of belonging. The scent of home. The sound of my own laughter. Now all of it was gone. And I was the only one who noticed. 2 nights later, I came home late from work. My things were missing from the living room. The couch cushions were replaced. My boxes, labeled Lena, were gone. I found them in the garage, stacked beside the recycling bins. When I asked, my sister looked up from her phone and said, "Oh, we needed the space. We figured you would not mind." I nodded, then walked to my car and cried. Not because they had moved my things, but because no one thought it would matter. That night, I slept in my car. It was the first time I had not slept inside that house in nearly 6 years. And no one called to ask why. The next morning, I walked in, gathered the lemon cake dish I had left behind, and placed it quietly into a bag. My brother brushed past me, talking on the phone, laughing loudly. I stood still in the hallway. I realized something: none of them had ever asked what I wanted, what I dreamed of, what I planned. They never wondered if I had goals. They never saw me as someone who could build anything. I was just support, a permanent shadow. But even shadows stretch, and I had reached my limit. They thought I was fading, dissolving quietly like a forgotten note. But in the silence they gave me, I started writing the rest of the song. The next time they erased me, they would learn something they had never dared to ask: what happens when the background takes the stage? It was a Tuesday when everything broke, not with shouting, not with slammed doors, but with quiet cruelty dressed in logic. I came home from work, early for once, thinking I might cook something warm, maybe a stew or some bread. I had not eaten a full meal in 2 days. The fridge had been cleared without warning. My name, once written in black marker on containers, had been scrubbed off. The lights were off in the kitchen. But in the living room, my sister, brother, and their partners were gathered. My mother sat at the edge of the couch, hands folded. I stood in the doorway, damp from the rain, holding a bag of groceries. My sister looked up. Her tone was casual, almost sweet. "We need to talk." They made space for everyone to sit except me. I stood, dripping water onto the hardwood floor. My brother cleared his throat. "Lena, it is just not working anymore. The house is getting crowded. There is a lot of stuff. And, with the baby..." My sister jumped in. "We just do not have space for you. Get out." No hesitation. No empathy. Just out. My mother did not raise her head. I stood there for a few seconds, still holding a bag of onions and canned beans. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out.
Because what could I say? They were not asking me.
They were telling me. I nodded and turned to leave. No one followed. I packed that night in silence. Not one person helped. No one asked where I would go. I heard laughter from the living room. A movie played. Someone popped popcorn. I had given them everything.
Time.
Money. My name on papers. My presence at every crisis. And in return, they had given me nothing but absence. The absence of love. Of dignity. Of space. I moved into a rented room in the city. A small basement apartment with peeling wallpaper and a window that looked into a parking garage. But it was quiet.
Clean. Mine.
The silence there was not painful. It was peaceful. And for the first time, I allowed myself to breathe. At first, no one texted. A full week passed. Then my sister sent a message asking if I still had the password to the Netflix account. I did not reply. My mother called. I answered. She asked if I was okay. I said I was busy. She said nothing else. That was the moment I felt the tear, not the emotional one, but the final one. The break between who I had been and who I was becoming. I started walking to work instead of taking the train. I journaled, read legal blogs, searched records. Every night, I reviewed documents I had once saved out of obligation. Now I saw them differently. I found the deed. My name. Still listed. I found the bank statements. My down payment. $38,000. Not a loan. A gift they had called it then, so casual, so manipulative. But legally it had meaning. The house was part mine. More than part. I held the paper in my hands, trembling. I thought about the paper crane. Still folded. Still safe in the drawer, where I had kept it all. The symbol of every small thing I had given, delicate, ignored, but quietly powerful. I did not want revenge. I wanted recognition. But when recognition is denied for too long, it grows into something sharper. Not rage. Not hate. Resolve. I started writing everything down. Timelines.
Costs. Statements.
I contacted a lawyer. I did not tell anyone. They believed I was gone. That I had drifted off, like a leaf swept up by the city wind. But I was still here. And I was holding the roots. There was one last moment I allowed myself to cry. It was late. I was sitting on the cold floor of my tiny apartment, flipping through an old album I had found at the bottom of a box. Every page had someone smiling. Except me. I was always off to the side. Half visible. half-claimed. I pressed my hand against the image of myself at 16, wide-eyed, hopeful, holding a tray of lemonade at someone else's celebration. Even then, I had been serving. That was the night I burned the albums. Not in anger, but in release. The memories could stay with me. The proof I needed lived elsewhere. I began making a list, not of what I had lost, but of what I still owned. It was longer than I expected.
Receipts.
Papers, emails, screenshots. But more than that, my silence, my grace, my strength. I had been the helper, but now I would be the headline. The next time they opened their front door, they would not find me waiting. They would find a letter, folded like the crane they forgot, sharp at the corners, soft in the center, and powerful enough to make a house fall silent. After the silence came something else. A kind of stillness I had never known. The city did not demand much from me. It let me walk unnoticed, pay my rent, fold my laundry, and disappear into routines of my own choosing. For the first time in my life, I was not responsible for anyone else's comfort. I stopped checking my phone. No one called unless they needed something, and I did not answer. They thought I was sulking.
Healing. Moving on.
What I was doing was preparing. I met with my lawyer weekly. We built a case like a quilt, stitched from receipts, old messages, original deed copies, and bank transfers. Everything had a paper trail. Everything they had taken for granted, I had saved. I changed my email password, my bank logins. I removed my name from every shared account, except the house deed. That one stayed exactly where it was. Meanwhile, my family grew bolder. I still followed them from afar, quietly. My sister began posting renovation updates. Tearing out the old tiles today. Turning this house into a real home. Can't wait to build our future here. I scrolled past these captions with a calm I did not fake. They had no idea they were investing in something that was not theirs. At least, not anymore. They hosted more dinners. More photos. My name was never mentioned. It was like I had died quietly and been replaced with more room for their pride. My brother posted a reel of the backyard, now cleared and filled with toys and patio furniture. My garden, where I used to plant herbs and trim roses, had been flattened into a play area. He captioned it, "Starting fresh." I copied the photo, saved it to the file. One day, I drove by the house. I parked a few doors down, far enough to stay invisible. I watched as my mother stepped onto the porch.
She had aged.
Or maybe I was seeing her with new eyes. She adjusted a flower pot on the step. The same one I had bought her for Mother's Day years ago. It still had the chip in the corner. I remembered how she had hugged me when I gave it to her. Now she did not even know where I lived. I wanted to walk up to her, ask why, but I did not, because I was no longer asking. Back in my apartment, I pulled out the paper crane. It had yellowed slightly at the edges. A few creases were worn, but it still held its shape. Still quiet. Still folded. I remembered the day I had made it. Sitting in the loan office, waiting for the notary. My sister had been 30 minutes late. My brother had forgotten his ID. But I had come early, documents ready, pen in hand. And while they whispered about lunch plans, I had folded that paper silently. No one asked what I was making. Now it would be the symbol of everything they missed. The lawyer sent me a draft of the final documents. Ownership transfer forms. Verification of investment. Eviction notice templates. "Are you ready?" she asked during our final meeting. I nodded. I had been ready for years. The first letter I sent was formal.
Cold.
It explained the chain of ownership and legal rights. It stated that as majority co-owner, and with their failure to refinance or buy out my share, I had full rights to execute a purchase and assume full control. It gave them 30 days. The second letter was delivered by hand, by courier. This one was softer. 1 page. A note. It read, "You told me there was no space left. Now you will learn what it means to be left out." Attached to it was a copy of the deed.
Signed.
Stamped.
Filed.
With my name as the sole owner. No one called. But the next morning my mother texted, Did you mean to send this? I did not reply. 2 hours later, my brother messaged, Is this a joke? Still, I stayed silent. My sister sent a voice memo full of outrage, confusion, and accusations. I listened once, then deleted it. I gave them time, respect, warning. They gave me indifference, distance, and cruelty wrapped in convenience. Now, they would receive silence in return. But this silence had teeth. In the city, I went about my days as if nothing had changed. But I could feel the shift, like air pressure before a storm. They still did not believe it would happen. They thought it was a bluff. I had been gentle for too long. But power is not always loud. Sometimes it is just done. They were still laughing at old jokes, still sipping coffee in the house I had bought and bled for. But the papers were already signed. The keys already changed. They just had not opened the door yet to see the lock that no longer turned for them. It happened on a Monday, gray and ordinary, the kind of day people forget unless something unforgettable rises from it. I had taken the afternoon off. Not because I was tired, but because I needed to feel the moment when everything tilted. I needed to breathe it in. I walked to the courthouse. Not out of rage, not for spectacle, just for clarity. The documents had been prepared. The check had cleared. The county clerk was polite, unaware that this simple transaction held the weight of a decade's worth of silence. She handed me the certified deed. I read it once. My name. Only mine. I folded it carefully and placed it in the folder I carried, next to the photo of the chipped flower pot and the printout of my brother's smug backyard post. The house was now mine. Officially. Fully. Legally. All it had taken was their arrogance and my patience. That evening, I walked by the house again. Lights were on in every room. The cherry tree, now bare, reached like fingers into the night sky. I watched as silhouettes passed through the windows, my brother setting a bowl on the table, my sister carrying laundry. The rhythm of their lives, uninterrupted. They still had no idea. They believed silence meant surrender. They thought my absence was defeat. They never considered that I might be watching with a pen in my hand. A week earlier, I had discovered something. Something almost laughable. The refinancing attempt they made 2 years ago, when they tried to remove my name from the loan, it had failed. They never followed up. Never corrected the paperwork. So the bank? It still listed me. And the deed? It had never been altered. In fact, the loan officer I contacted had remembered me. You are the responsible one, she said with a smile. You did everything right. I had thanked her. And hung up knowing something deeper than satisfaction. Justice. Quiet, grounded, complete. The next piece arrived by accident. An email forwarded from an old account I barely checked. It was from a family friend, someone I had not spoken to in years. Just saw your sister's post. Congrats on the house. Looks amazing. I blinked. The post was a tour video. My sister walking through each room, boasting about renovations. Our forever home, she wrote in the caption. She used the word we 7 times. Never once said Lena. I watched the video twice. Then downloaded it and saved it in my legal archive. My lawyer had advised me. They think this is theirs. Use that. So I did. I remembered a quote from years back. I had scribbled it in a notebook during a stormy night. They raised her to be chosen. I raised myself to survive. That was the truth of it, was it not? They had always believed one of them would end up in charge. But I had never been anyone's pick. Not for attention. Not for affection. Not for credit. So I had stopped waiting. And I had started building. I began writing a letter. Not legal. Not formal. Just real. A letter to the house. I wrote, You held me when they would not. You gave me shelter when their words gave me none. They think they live inside you, but they do not know your bones are mine. I folded the letter and placed it with a paper crane. Not for them. For me. I still remember the day I almost said something. I was standing outside the house, one hand on the mailbox, the other clutching my purse. My sister was leaving for the store. She looked right past me, then did a double take. Lena? I smiled. She waited for an explanation. I gave none. Just a wave. Then turned and walked away. She would learn soon enough. They had mocked my silence for years. Now it was a sword. They had dismissed my kindness. Now it was armor. And the next time they laughed in that living room, they would feel the walls shift, just slightly. Just enough. Because the owner was no longer among them. But the owner was coming home. The documents were filed. The ink had dried. The title had changed hands, quietly, officially, and forever. And while they toasted to a future they thought they owned, I stood behind the curtain of their certainty, holding the strings they never thought to look for. It was not a bang. It was a breath. The shift did not come with thunder. It came with stillness. I sat in my apartment, the deed on my lap, the official transfer notice sent, and the clock ticking. 30 days. That was what I gave them. 30 silent, legal, irrefutable days to face the truth. But they never read the fine print. They never imagined I could reach so far into the foundations they had buried me beneath. They thought I had disappeared. They were wrong. I waited 2 days. Then I drove to the house, not to see them, but to see the mailbox. I needed to make sure the new plaque had arrived.
It had.
Brushed bronze, subtle, elegant. It read, Lena M., sole owner. I smiled.
They would not understand what it meant.
Not right away. But they would see it. Every day. Until they did. Back at work, I turned down dinner invitations. I needed quiet. I needed to feel this moment fully. Because this was the twist. This was the reversal. They had thrown me out of the house I helped pay for. Erased my name from their memories. Built their lives on top of my sacrifice. But they forgot something essential. I was not a guest. I was the owner. When the official eviction letters were delivered, the silence was sharp. My lawyer had been precise. Clean language, generous deadlines, zero malice. Just truth. She sent me a message that morning. We're live. Within hours, my sister called. I ignored it. Then my brother. 2 missed calls. A third. Then my mother. I stared at the screen. Then turned the phone face down. A day passed. Then 2. Then the storm arrived. A group message from my sister, sent to family, cousins, even old friends. I don't know what's going on. Lena is trying to evict us from the house. The one we've lived in for years. This is insane. Please pray for our family. I read it once. Then deleted it. They had never invited me into their family texts before.
I was not going to start answering now.
They began knocking on doors. Not mine. Legal doors. They found out quickly what I already knew. They had no claim.
They never bought out my share.
They never refinanced. They never updated the title. I had all the receipts. Every monthly contribution. Every document. Every agreement. Even the original down payment transfer, $38,000 from my account, notarized and signed. Their names were nowhere. Their signatures absent. Their claim, emotional. Mine, legal. My brother left a voicemail. You can't do this. You're not that kind of person. But I was. Because they had made me this person. I sent a single email. 1 sentence. You told me there was no space for me. Now there is no space for you. No sign-off. No explanation. Just clarity. Then I changed the locks. Quietly. Legally.
Completely.
The locksmith arrived in the early morning. He worked quickly, glancing up at me only once. You live here? He asked casually. I nodded. Siblings? Used to be. He did not ask anything else. When he was done, he handed me a fresh set of keys. I held them like they were sacred. I walked through the house slowly, after they had left for the day. They had not moved out yet, but I knew the clock was ticking. I moved room to room, touched walls, saw the chipped paint I had once patched, the kitchen tile I had chosen, the closet I had slept beside for 3 years, and, in the living room, the lemon cake dish. Still there. Still unwashed. I took it in my hands and smiled. Some things never changed. But I had. That night, I placed the paper crane on the mantel. And beneath it, I left a note. You treated me like a tenant, but this was never your home. Then I turned off the lights and walked out the front door, locked it, and for the first time, the sound of that click felt like justice. They thought I was a guest. I was the owner. While they scrambled to understand what had happened, I was already one step ahead, calm, silent, and holding every piece they had left behind. They had built their lives on my silence. Now they would watch those lives shift brick by careful brick. They did not leave. Not right away. At first, they ignored the notices, brushed them off as a misunderstanding. They convinced themselves that I would back down, that I was bluffing, that I would remember my place, the one they had carved out for me at the edge of their comfort, not within it. But my silence did not bend this time. It held, and it spread. A week passed. Then 2. Then came the emails from their lawyer, thin, panicked, full of desperate language dressed in formality. We would like to request clarification. We believe there has been a miscommunication. We hope to resolve this amicably. My attorney replied with the facts, the signatures, the timestamps, the law.
Their tone changed after that.
No more hope, just protest. But the truth stood. I did not need their permission to claim what was already mine. In the background, I was setting the stage. A final dinner invitation, sent via registered mail. Elegant, formal brief. To my mother, my brother, my sister, and their partners. Please join me for dinner at 7 p.m. at the house. No explanation. No emotion.
Just a time.
A place. A moment. I returned to the house alone the night before. I brought no bags. Just a folded note, the lemon cake dish, and the paper crane. I cleaned quietly. The kind of cleaning that feels like ceremony. I polished the table. The one they had crowded with praise for everyone but me. I straightened the chairs. The ones they had filled with people who never saw me. And I lit a single candle.
Soft. Steady.
The kind you use for silence, not celebration. The next morning, I arrived early. A locksmith reset the final locks. A delivery truck brought the notarized documents. And I placed the final deed in an envelope on the table. I sat for a moment in the quiet, looking around the house they thought belonged to them. I thought about all the days I had folded their laundry, reheated leftovers, patched broken things without asking for thanks. All the birthdays they forgot. All the rooms they filled with noise to drown me out. But I was not gone. I was rooted. They arrived late, of course. All of them together in one car. They came in cautious. They saw the candle, the table set, and they looked confused. I greeted them with a nod. No hugs, just a chair for each of them. And at the center, an empty one. The same way they had left me, uncounted. They sat, whispered. My sister asked, "What is this?" My mother avoided my eyes. My brother crossed his arms. I said nothing. I handed each of them a sealed envelope. They opened them. Read slowly. Silence followed. The kind of silence that unravels a whole history. The document was simple. Proof of purchase. Verification of deed. Eviction schedule. Final notice. And at the top, my name. Alone. Undeniable. My sister stood up first. "This is not fair." My brother muttered, "You can't be serious." My mother finally looked at me. "Why now?" I looked at her, then down at the paper crane in my palm, and I said the only sentence that mattered. "Because I was always here. You just never looked." I stood, took the lemon cake dish from the shelf, and placed it at the center of the table, then walked to the door. I did not slam it. I did not raise my voice. I just closed it softly behind me, let them sit there. Let them feel what I had felt. Excluded. Small. Unwelcome. Outside, the night air was calm. The stars above the cherry tree blinked as if they knew the truth now had roots. Inside that house, they held papers they could not tear, signed by hands they could no longer control. Outside, I stood steady, no longer asking for space, but owning every corner they thought they could claim. The table was still set, but the seat they had ignored was now the one that mattered most. They stayed seated after I walked out. I knew they would, not because they respected me, but because they needed to understand what had just happened. And they could not all at once. The paper in their hands said things their minds refused to accept, that their names had never been on the deed, that their residency had no legal standing, that their time was no longer theirs to stretch. The house they lived in was not theirs. The home they curated was borrowed, and the person they had erased had just taken it back. Outside, I stood at the edge of the lawn, near the bare cherry tree. The same one I used to sit under as a child while my siblings played inside. The same one I used to trim and water while they criticized my obsession with quiet things. I placed my hand against its bark. Rough, rooted, real. Behind me, I heard the door open, then close. Footsteps. I did not turn around. My mother's voice came, low and unsure. "Lena, what are you doing?" I faced the tree, then slowly turned to her. "I am giving you the grace you never gave me. Time." She did not reply. She stepped back inside. I heard my brother raise his voice, my sister cry, their partners asking questions. But I stayed outside.
Still. Whole.
The next day, I returned with a representative, quiet, suited, efficient. We posted the official eviction notice on the front door.
Public. Plain.
Final. I watched from my car as my sister came outside, tore the notice down, and shouted to no one in particular. She did not know I was watching. She never had. They tried everything.
Guilt.
Bargaining. Anger. They told stories to relatives. Rewrote the timeline. Claimed they were tricked. But I had facts.
Paper. History.
And silence. The most dignified weapon I had ever known. 1 week later, I held a small gathering at the house. Not a party. A closing. I invited the lawyer, the notary, and 2 witnesses. We stood in the living room. I signed the final documents. Ownership complete. Everything legal. Irrevocable. And then, without fanfare, I walked over to the fireplace. Set the paper crane back on the mantel. Beneath it, the lemon cake dish. And between them, a single frame. Inside, the deed. My name. Alone. My brother showed up an hour later. Uninvited. He stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "You really did it." I nodded. He laughed bitterly. Everyone clapped for her. But when I stood, they went quiet. I said nothing. He looked around, then back at me. "What do we do now?" I walked past him, unlocked the door from inside, held it open. "You leave." He hesitated, then walked out. No slamming, no defiance. Just a man who had forgotten who held the foundation. That night, I sat at the table. The one they never offer me a seat at. I placed a single plate, a fork, a slice of lemon cake, and I ate it slowly, in silence. And it tasted like justice. Have you ever seen someone underestimate the wrong person? Tell us your story in the comments. The chairs were still warm where they once sat, but the power in the room had shifted. No applause was needed. No speech delivered. Just the silent thunder of a woman reclaiming her space, without rage, without noise, but with everything they thought she lacked. They left in stages. First my brother, driving away without goodbye. He did not pack much, just a duffel bag, a few tools, and the pride he had buried under sarcasm for years. I watched from the second-floor window, unseen. When his car disappeared around the corner, it felt like the house exhaled. My sister lingered. Her husband argued. Loudly. He demanded time, protested unfairness, listed all the things they had built here. But when the court order was redelivered, this time with the sheriff's backing, they grew quiet. Their final night was filled with noise. Children crying. Doors closing too hard. My sister pacing. My mother silent. I sat in my room listening, not gloating, just remembering every night I had cried in silence while they laughed. Justice does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers like that. The morning they left, I did not come downstairs. They did not knock. They packed quickly,
badly.
Left half-full boxes and tangled cords. Forgot the lemon cake dish. Left behind children's drawings taped to walls and old grocery lists on the fridge. When the moving truck pulled away, I walked through the house barefoot,
Room by room.
it was strange, the silence. Not heavy, just real. I opened every window. Let the old air out.
Let myself in.
The neighbors began to notice. Mrs. Delaney next door waved when I came out to water the cherry tree. Did they move? She asked softly. I nodded. New owners. No, I said. Same owner. Just a quieter one. She smiled. Well, it is good to see you. It was the first time anyone had ever said that to me on this street. The phone rang often that week. My mother. Twice a day. I did not answer. Then texts. From cousins, aunts, family friends. Most said the same thing. I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. You should talk to them. Family is more important than houses. But I had lived in that house without dignity for too long to let it define me again. This was not about walls. It was about worth. My lawyer asked if I wanted to press for damages. I said no. I had what I needed. Sometimes, the truest revenge is letting people sit with the echo of their choices. No apology could fill that space. I found the paper crane still on the mantel. Unmoved. Still folded. Still whole. I placed it inside a glass dome. Set it in the center of the table. Not as a warning, but as a reminder that strength, when folded quietly, can still carry weight. One day, I received a letter. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. It was my sister. Inside were only 3 words. Are you happy? I folded the letter. Placed it in the back of my journal. I did not write her back. Because happiness was not the point.
Peace was.
And I had it now. In the following days, the house became lighter. I painted the guest room, the one I had once been forced to leave. I tore up the rug in the hallway, found the original wood beneath it. I refinished the floors with my own hands. Every stroke, every grain mine. My brother texted me once. I messed up. No follow-up. No request. Just that. I saved the message. Never replied. Because some things deserve to be felt without comfort. I walked through the house late one night, candle in hand. No lights. No sound. Just the soft creak of memory adjusting to the truth. This was not the house I had been cast out of. This was the home I had returned to on my own terms, not to reclaim the past, but to honor the version of me that had never been welcomed. They had left with their boxes and excuses, but the weight of what they abandoned stayed behind. I did not chase them. I did not fix their endings. I simply turned on the light and finally saw the room they had always pretended I did not deserve. The silence after their departure was not hollow. It was full of memory, of space, of breath I had never fully drawn in this house until now. For the first time in years, I walked from one end of the hallway to the other without hearing someone else's voice, someone else's demands. Just my own footsteps, my own rhythm, my own life. But peace carries its own kind of ache. Not regret, not doubt. Just the quiet realization that everything I endured still lived in the walls, even as the people who caused it no longer did. My mother called again. This time, I answered. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Quieter. Like someone standing in the shadow of a mistake too large to name. I did not know, she said. I did, I replied. There was no anger in my tone. Just finality. She asked if she could visit. I told her not yet. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed the house to know what it felt like to hold only truth for a little while. My sister tried a different tactic. An email titled Olive Branch. Inside, paragraphs of justification. She mentioned the stress of raising children, the pressure she felt, the way she thought I had checked out emotionally. She ended with, "We are still sisters. We still have time." I closed the email without responding. Not because I disagreed, but because time is a gift, not a guarantee. And she had spent hers without ever asking the cost. One afternoon, I found an old box in the attic. Inside were photos, some I had taken, most I had been cut from. There were drawings I had made in school, cards I had written, notes passed between cousins that never included my name. I sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting them one by one, not to relive the pain, but to acknowledge the girl who once thought kindness would be enough. I burned a few,
Kept the rest. We do not always heal by forgetting.
sometimes we heal by remembering with boundaries. The house grew warmer as the days passed. I opened windows, repainted walls. I found joy in small things, rearranging the bookshelf, cooking for one, dancing barefoot in the kitchen. No one was watching, and I did not need to be seen to feel full. Occasionally, people asked where my family had gone. Neighbors, church friends, an old coworker who drove past the house and texted, "Thought I saw you gardening. Was that you?" "Yes," I replied. "Just me now." Most people paused at that, but the ones who mattered understood. Sometimes peace looks like solitude. Sometimes family is the name we stop giving to those who refuse to see us. Months passed. Then came the letter. Handwritten. Simple. From my niece. She was only 10. "Dear Aunt Lena, Mom says you're mad.
I don't really know why.
But I miss you. Can I visit you sometime? Also, the lemon cake was the best.
Love."
Amira." I cried quietly into my hands, not because of the pain, but because of the innocence that still reached through the cracks. I wrote her back, told her she was always welcome, that sometimes grown-ups forget how to say sorry, and that the recipe was waiting when she was ready. I did not shut the door on my family. I just no longer left it wide open. They would have to knock now. And if I answered, it would be on my terms. In the evenings, I sat under the cherry tree.
Alone sometimes.
But not lonely. I had become a different version of myself. Not harder, just clearer. Not colder, just quieter. And in that stillness, I discovered something I had never dared to believe, that I was not meant to be anyone's background. I was always the story. They just never read the page. Their absence echoed in the rooms they once claimed, but the peace that remained was louder. I did not replace them. I did not erase them. I simply stood still long enough for the house to remember, whose heartbeat it had followed all along. It has been a year since I locked the door behind them, a year since the silence became sacred instead of suffocating, a year since I stopped begging to be seen by people who only looked when they needed something. The house has changed, but not dramatically.
The walls are the same.
The creaks in the hallway remain. The light still filters through the front windows just the way it did when I used to sit on the couch, tucked to one side, pretending I was just happy to help. But now, the house knows who lives here.
Now, so do I.
I have not spoken to my sister in months. My brother moved across the state. My mother sent a birthday card this year. Handwritten. No gift. Just a note. "I am sorry I was not stronger when you needed me.
I see that now.
I hope you are okay." I did not write back, but I kept the card. Not out of sentiment. Out of understanding. Some people never learn to say, "I love you," in a way that does not wound. And that is not mine to fix. I sometimes walk the halls of this house like a museum. Each room holds a version of me I used to be. The quiet girl who made herself smaller. The sister who stood behind the camera. The woman who was told, "We just do not have space for you." I walk past those memories and let them exist. But I do not carry them anymore. Now I carry softness, choice, and stillness. Now I carry me. Last week, I had friends over. Real ones. We sat around the table and shared a meal I cooked in a kitchen no one criticizes anymore. Someone asked who used to live here before. I smiled and said, "A girl who forgot her own worth." She moved out. I moved in. They laughed, not knowing the whole truth. And that was fine. Because sometimes the most sacred stories are the ones we no longer need to explain. The paper crane is still here. It rests beneath a glass dome on the mantel. Sometimes I catch guests looking at it curiously. No one asks what it means. But I know. I remember folding it that day in the loan office. I remember thinking, maybe if I make myself useful enough, they will make space for me. Now, I look at it and think I never needed their space. I needed my own.
And I made it.
Quietly.
Legally.
Entirely. I no longer walk around holding tension in my spine. I no longer brace for exclusion. I no longer shrink when someone else speaks. Peace has changed me. It has made me softer, but never smaller. It has made me quiet, but never invisible. It has made me forgiving, but never forgetful. Sometimes, when the wind hits the cherry tree just right, I think I hear echoes. Not voices. Not regrets. Just memory rustling through the branches. And I smile. Because for once, I am not haunted by what could have been. I am comforted by what finally is. I did not build this house with hammers or nails. I built it with endurance. I built it with receipts and patience and silence that cut deeper than noise. I built it with every ignored birthday, every unwashed plate, every paper cup handed to me while others got crystal. I built it with the things they left behind when they forgot I was watching. And now, I do not wait for them to come back. I do not leave the porch light on, but I do light a candle sometimes. For the girl I used to be, she deserved more, and I became it for her. If you have ever had to walk away from family for your own peace, know this. You are not alone. Share your story below. The girl they overlooked now walks barefoot through the home she owns. Not to prove a point, but because every quiet step reminds her that she is no longer waiting to be invited inside. She is already home. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. This was not just about a house. It never was. It was about the invisible roles we are forced into. The ways we are told to be grateful for crumbs when we built the table. The quiet sacrifices made in kitchens and back seats and guest rooms that never quite belonged to us. And the slow, steady power of reclaiming our place, not by fighting louder, but by standing firmer. I know some of you have lived this. Maybe not with deeds and walls and eviction letters, but in family dinners where your name was never spoken. In group photos you took but were not in. In favors repaid with silence. In spaces you help hold together, only to be told you do not belong. If that is you, I see you, and you deserve peace. You deserve the kind of ending that does not wait for an apology. The kind of ending where you stop knocking, because you realize the door was always yours. So, if this story meant something to you, if you felt even a little bit seen, do not leave quietly. Subscribe for more stories like this. Stories where the quiet ones rise, where grace becomes power, and where poetic justice walks barefoot through the halls they were told they did not deserve. Because we are done asking for space. We are taking it. Some homes are not built with bricks. They are built with memory, with silence, with paper cranes that fold and unfold across years of being forgotten, until one day they fly back through the front door and land exactly where they belong.